here's another just easy, quick meal that is gonna showcase how I was not prepared at all for dinner tonight, and so how I'm gonna make something magical happen. First thing is I had some Italian sausages in the freezer, and so I'm bathing them in some cold water, just in a small little glass pan, and that'll get those thawed really quickly. I love sausages because of how fast they defrost. I also have my super cubes out. If you don't have super cubes, highly recommend them. And I'm gonna defrost 2 cups of some bone broth that I made. And I'm just gonna pull that out to show you how awesome the super cubes are. So easy to get out, and I'll be able to defrost that using the microwave to get that ready. We are gonna make, and using arborio rice, we're gonna make a very quick risotto type dish that's going to have the Italian sausages. I have some organic Brussels sprouts and some pre-sauteed onions. These were already in my refrigerator, which is fabulous, big time saver. So onions, Brussels sprouts, the sausages, and then I'm gonna go ahead and roast some of these honey squashes because it's fall here, and I promised myself this year I would eat more fall vegetables. So let me get started with all that. We're gonna go ahead and get our pan preheating. Okay, so while I'm waiting for my pan to preheat, I'm gonna go ahead and get my squashes ready. Because I am undergoing chemo treatment, they're having me wash all my fruits and vegetables before I eat them. So if you're doing the same thing, make sure you do that. If not, I honestly didn't used to do that because I'm gonna cook it anyway, but I'm following the doctor's orders. So when you are working with squashes, any of your hard fall squashes, your acorn squashes, this is a honey nut squash, I think. If you're using your any of your other fall squashes, you're gonna scoop out the center of the squash with a spoon. So all you do is take a spoon, reach in here, and run the edge, just like you're cleaning out a pumpkin when you go to carve your pumpkins. And that's it. Then when you're prepping your squashes, you want to get all the pieces to be roughly the same size. The goal is that they cook evenly. So I have 2 different size squashes, big squash, little squash. They're gonna come out to be the same sizes when I'm chopping everything. So I have my squash chopped. They're all roughly about the same size. I've lined my air fryer pan or my toaster oven. It's the Ninja Fold Fryer. I don't know what that's called, but my small oven. I've taken that sheet pan, lined it with foil just because I hate trying to clean things that stick onto pans. And I will always line something with a parchment paper or foil. And we're just gonna load this on here. There's no reason to dirty an extra bowl that you then have to wash later. So everything's thrown on here. I have my olive oil sprayer, highly recommend. Gonna coat that pretty well. In this situation, because we're mixing it with other ingredients, I'm just gonna season with salt and pepper. But you could also season, if you were cooking this as a standalone, you could use cinnamon, maple syrup. You know, the sky's the limit with what you wanna season it with. Let's see. This is my absolute favorite spatula. It's called a pancake spatula, but I use it for everything. And I'm just gonna toss this. Add a little bit more olive oil. Remember, your brain really likes oil. So if you're using a good quality oil, then it's actually good for you, as opposed to what they told us in the 1990s. All right. And so I'm gonna set this to the side. They're gonna cook pretty quickly because I chopped them pretty small because I'm trying to get dinner done quickly. So I'm gonna set them to the side and not pop them in the oven quite yet. I'm gonna get my next ingredient started. So I've got my onions cooking. Like I said, I pulled mine out of the oven. If you were to do it fresh, you're just gonna take 1 medium to large onion and dice it. You'll cook it in the pan until they're soft. For me, that always takes longer than any cooking show ever says. And then I've got my chicken broth defrosted and warmed up. Some risotto recipes are super involved. How about involved? And this is one that is super simple with simple ingredients that is very easy. So my onions are fully heated through. If you were doing yours, again, actually taste it and make sure it's soft. Your onions won't get softer in the cooking process, so you want to make sure you always have your soft onions here. When you're using arborio rice, if you read the package, it will say that you want to rinse the rice to release the starch off of the grain. That is true if you want a fluffy rice. If you want a risotto rice, we actually want to keep all of the starch on the rice. So you're going to pour unrinsed rice into your pan, and then you're going to give it a nice stir. So you already have olive oil in your pan from cooking your onions. That is going to coat the rice just enough. You'll get the rice even on the bottom of the pan, and then you're going to let that cook for just a few minutes, turning it regularly, and you'll see that the rice grain actually changes its appearance just ever so slightly. It's going to become just a little bit translucent all around the edge of the rice. It'll happen pretty quickly when you put it on heat and you're just watching for it to get even more. So I'm just going to look at my clock, and these will stay toasting in the pan for 2 to 3 minutes. In our pan we have our softened onions and our toasted rice. Now we're going to add our broth. If you look at a lot of fancy recipes, then they're probably going to deglaze the pan with white wine. What deglaze means is all of the yummy goodness that ended up on the bottom of your pan from cooking your onions. When you put liquid in that, you're going to scrape the bottom with the liquid, and then those flavors are going to return back to your dish. So if you're at a restaurant or if you're doing a fancy risotto recipe, that's when you'll use a white wine, and that's just building a bunch of flavors. I don't have white wine in my house usually, and honestly, I'm way too cheap to buy white wine to cook a dish. So I'm just using part of my chicken stock. So I'm going to use my measuring cup, and I'm just going to pour just a little bit, I got a little foggy there, a little bit of my chicken broth in, and that is just so I can scrape up the bottom of my dish. I forgot to mention, if you had garlic at home, you could add garlic, and that's a really great flavor for this dish. I am making a meal from the day before I go to the grocery store ingredients, and I am out of garlic. So you would have minced the garlic when you cut your onions, but you would have put your onions in, softened your onions fully, let your garlic sit on your cutting board for at least 10 minutes. That's how you get a lot of the nutrients out of the garlic. And then right before you add your rice, you would have thrown your garlic in and just sauteed it until you started to smell the garlic. That would have been enough for the garlic to have cooked before then you would have added your rice. So I'm just moving this rice around until the liquid evaporates and absorbs. And I started with 2 cups of liquid. And so I'm just going to stir this. The stirring typically for risotto happens the entire cook time. The reason that this is a quick and easy risotto recipe is we're just not going to do it. But you do want to take some time to stir, especially here at the beginning, because we are actually trying to wash a lot of that starch off the grain. So I am going to go ahead and do some stirring. And you'll see pretty quickly that the liquid gets absorbed. The reason you don't add it all at once is because you are building those starch layers. Martha Stewart used to teach that you only stir the risotto in one direction. I have no idea if that's what you should do or not, but I don't. Traditionally, risotto is a very labor-intensive dish because somebody is stirring the pot the entire time. And that is the traditional way, and it is delicious and wonderful, but for the average home cook, I don't have a desire to do that. So you'll notice I'm just adding a little bit of liquid at a time and getting that rice stirred. This whole time for the oven or the stovetop that I'm cooking on at my apartment, it's shown at a high heat, but you would cook most of this at a medium heat so you don't burn your onions. Some recipes will tell you that you don't want to get any color on your onions and you want to leave them translucent. I like to cook my onions so that they do get a little color because I like the caramelization flavor in my onions. What the other recipes will tell you, and their goal is for your onions to match the color of the rice. And the very traditional recipes will have it be a very white dish, but I'm using a very colorful bone broth, chicken bone broth, so already my rice is gonna have a lot of color to it. Adding the caramel of the onions just gives me more flavor, especially when I'm bypassing using some of the other ingredients like the garlic tonight because I don't have any, or the white wine because I just don't keep that in the house. So you'll see we're just quickly stirring everything and I'm adding this liquid in. This is 2 cups of bone broth, and then I'm going to go ahead, stir this a little bit, and I'm going to do 1 more cup of liquid. So I'm just going to pour that in there so it's easy when I'm ready for it. And I do have the heat on a pretty high heat right now because I do want this to come up to a simmer. Some recipes will also have you have your liquid in a pot on the stove to have it hot and bring it up to temperature. For this recipe, I don't find that's needed. And again, for me, because I don't like doing dishes, heating it up in the microwave, and that was fine. And I don't heat it all the way up, just a little bit. All right, so as that liquid's getting absorbed, I'm gonna go ahead and add another half cup-ish. As more liquid gets in the pan, your stirring style is gonna need to change so you don't splash everywhere. If you recall, these videos are really made for my daughter, so she knows how to cook the recipes she grew up eating and loving. And so this message really is for her to stir. It's better if everything stays in the pot. You don't need to make stirring harder than it is. Ever since she was little, it was very difficult for her to stir. She's now an adult and it's still very difficult to stir. I'm not sure what the struggle is there. So you'll see that the liquid gets absorbed pretty well, but I still have a good amount of liquid in the rice dish. I'm just gonna put the rest of the water in there. So just if you're keeping track, that was 1 cup of risotto, and I have 3 cups of liquid. And now I'm just gonna cover it, right? The goal of this dish is to just be a creamy, starchy rice dish without any dairy in it, and this will accomplish that. I'm gonna set a timer for 10 minutes. That way I can stir it again and develop some of that starch again. And we're gonna let this just relax while we get our Brussels sprouts ready. All right, before I start the Brussels sprouts, actually, I'm gonna get my squash in the toaster oven. All right, so those are going in the oven. This is gonna take about 20 minutes. Those, I'm not actually sure how long they're gonna take. I have it set for 375 for 10 minutes, and then we'll check on it. So let me show you how I like to do the Brussels sprouts. You're gonna cut the end off, and then debris will fall off. I just shove it off my board, and from there, tuck your fingers so you don't cut your fingers, and you're just gonna thinly slice your Brussels sprout a couple times, then roll it on its big flat surface. That way it doesn't roll around on you, and you're just gonna use your fingers, that edge of your finger, to guide your knife so that you get a nice thin Brussels sprout, almost like a shaved Brussels sprout is what we're going for. So again, just a couple times to get that nice big flat surface, and then super thin so they're like shaved. And this one was a bigger Brussels sprout, so I'm gonna roll it down again, and that's gonna give me some smaller slices again. So I have about half of a bag chopped. My family does not really like to eat leftover Brussels sprouts, so it's better for me to cook them fresh each time we want to eat them. You can see these are fairly well shaped, but there are a few that are a little bit thicker when they have the center of the Brussels sprout. So then I just run my knife through it, trying to get all the big, meatier pieces of Brussels sprouts chopped. And that's just because we like the shredded style in our house a lot better. If it doesn't matter to you, then don't worry about this step. But I like it to pretty seamlessly mix into the pasta or the rice or quinoa, whatever it is I'm mixing it with. I don't like the different sizes and different textures, so this is just a way to get everything a little bit more shaped. You probably could also throw this in a food processor if you wanted to. As you know, I don't like washing dishes, and a food processor has a lot of parts and components to use, so I tend to save that for only when I really need to use it. Okay, so just as a reminder, I've got my Brussels sprouts chopped. I've got my rice simmering. I did turn down my heat once I started seeing the steam come out from under my lid. So you just want that rice to simmer. You're gonna turn it down to a pretty low temperature. I have my squash cooking in my small oven. And so next I'm gonna get my sausages ready. All right, so I have my sausages on my cutting board. You'll see that I scooted my Brussels sprouts over to the side. That way I just use one cutting board. Again, dishwashing. And my rice is about to beep. So before I start cutting these and get my hands dirty, I'm gonna go ahead and turn my timer off and check on the underside. Now remember that your lid is gonna be hot. So use a towel or something, but that looks really good. So we are just gonna spend just a little bit of time stirring this. You'll see all the steam coming out. And we're stirring this so that, again, we're trying to get the starch and get this grain to release a lot of the starch. But we don't want to let out too much liquid. If you don't have very much liquid in there, you can always add a little bit more water. So I'm just going to cover that back up. I'm going to cook that for 10 more minutes. In the meantime, I have my other pan back here getting hot. And so I'm gonna cut my bratwurst, and what I do, or I'm sorry, these are sweet Italian sausages. I cut them down the middle. And again, I just like bite-sized pieces, which is why I'm doing it this way. So I cut them down the middle, and then I cut 2 at a time so that I get half moon shapes. The casing can sometimes be difficult to cut through. If you don't want the casing, you of course can peel that off before you start cutting. This particular brand of sausage, I don't do that. I don't mind the casing when I'm eating it with this particular brand of sausage. This is a pork Italian sausage. Whoops, I just lost one. All right. I don't like the piece of the casing though, that's floppy. All right, so again, 2 at a time, that saves you time. You can try a serrated knife if your chef's knife is not doing the job because it's too dull. I'm terrible at sharpening my knives, so I do regularly cook with dull knives. So you just heard the Ninja pop-top oven beep to tell me it was done, which is perfect timing because these are done. My pan is hot. This is a non-stick pan. I don't need to add oil to it. You can hear the sizzle. Maybe you can hear the sizzle. I don't know. Can you hear the sizzle? So we're gonna get these thrown in. There we go. And this sausage is already pre-cooked, so really what I'm just trying to do is get a nice sear or caramelization on it just to add some flavor and to render some of the fat because we don't like a really big fat feel in our mouths here at our house. So that's gonna get pretty juicy in the pan, and you may want to use a splatter screen just to help reduce the amount of mess that you might have from it. So my timer for my rice is going off. I'm gonna go ahead and use my towel again, and if you notice I just left my towel on my pan, that's a way to help me remember that it's gonna be hot and I don't burn myself. And I'm just gonna take that off, stir it some more. And this could actually use a little bit more liquid. It's not super starchy, so let me go ahead and taste it. And we're just going to see if the rice grain is cooked all the way through. You don't want it to have any crunch left in it. That's really tasty. So I'm going to add just a little bit more liquid and let it just steam itself. So I'm just putting in half a cup more liquid. And I'm just going to stir that. And while I'm in here, I'm going to add a little bit of salt. That's probably, I'm not really sure, maybe a quarter teaspoon of salt. My bone broth already was salted. All right, and that water has already absorbed in. I'm actually going to add another half a cup. This rice grain does a really good job of absorbing water. And I just want it to be just a little bit creamier. So that's why I added this extra liquid. If you don't have homemade bone broth, you can use a canned one, but you just might want to be layering some flavors in differently. And unfortunately, I don't know any good brands because I usually always make my own homemade bone broth. My sausage has been cooking here on the side. It's nice and brown now. I'm going to go and turn this off. And remember, always keep your handles away from you so you don't accidentally knock them. I'm using a slotted spatula, my favorite pancake spatula. I have a folded paper towel on a plate, and I'm going to take my sausage out of my pan and let these drain. And then I'm going to drain the pan. Oops. Sausage is overboard. They're hot. If you don't like hot things, don't do that. So anytime that you need to get rid of grease quickly, you can keep just a metal can in the freezer. Don't use plastic. And you can use your metal can to just catch your all of your remaining fats. And I'm got just a little bit left here, and we just don't really enjoy the mouthfeel of that kind of fat, so I'm just wiping out the remainder that didn't strain. And I'm going to set this to the side. It'll go back in the freezer, and then once that's full, we take it out to the trash. It's not good for your pipes for you to pour grease or coffee rinds, for that matter, down your drains. And that's why you use the metal cans. Plastic will melt to capture all your leftover grease. Okay, so this pan is actually still quite hot. I've turned off my rice because the texture is really good. I'm just letting that steam itself so it can absorb more of that starchy goodness, or the liquid to turn into starchy goodness. This is hot. I'm going to keep it about medium high. And now here's my olive oil. I'm going to just lightly spray my pan with olive oil. That's just the flavor that we prefer. And now I'm going to throw my Brussels sprouts into my pan. You could also use a bench scraper so that you would be making less of a mess, which would be a great idea. I'm going to spray a little bit more olive oil. Vegetables love olive oil. All right, and for this, My Brussels sprouts, maybe a half a teaspoon. These we're gonna cook very, very, very quickly. So you have a really nice hot pan. You've got a good amount of olive oil. We've got our salt. If you really dislike the flavor of Brussels sprouts, you can always add maple syrup or bacon or both, and that's really good. You'll notice after about a minute, the Brussels sprouts are going to change color. The green is going to be a really vibrant, like spring colored green, if you remember what the trees look like in the spring. And because they're roughly all the same size, they're going to cook at approximately the same rate. You'll notice I'm staying focused on these because we don't like mushy Brussels sprouts. So I'm just going to grab a fork. That's actually a good amount of salt. But I am going to add some pepper to it. Maybe. And stir this a little bit more. And then all of a sudden they're going to magically, the volume in the pan is going to change and the color is going to change, and that's when it's done. So Brussels sprouts release a lot of fluid or liquid, as does cabbage. And so when I take it out of the pan, I use a bowl, again lined with a paper towel. So our rice is almost done. We have our meat, we have our Brussels sprouts. I heard the beep of our squash. So after I took the lid off for my rice to check it one last time, I went ahead and stirred it for about 2 minutes, and it came to a beautiful creamy consistency by doing that final stir. Perfect amount of liquid, perfect amount of cooking time, and just by finishing it off with all that stirring, it really did bring it all together. If you are okay eating dairy, you can at this point add butter or Parmesan cheese or Pecorino Romano. All of that is super yummy. I don't do that because we try to eat somewhat dairy free. So if you really want that really punch of flavor of the grated Parmesan or the grated Pecorino Romano, don't add it into the primary dish, serve it on top of your rice, and then you'll get that really punchy flavor. So to serve this, remember your true nutritional powerhouse are your vegetables. So I'm gonna serve just a little bit of rice, not a ton, because that's not where all the good stuff is at. And then I'm gonna use my hands because that's what I really actually would do. I'm gonna add a little bit of my meat because that's a great source of protein. And then I'm gonna get my Brussels sprouts, again, hands, you guys. And you'll notice I'm putting on a good amount of Brussels sprouts because that's where so much of your nutrients are coming from. I'm gonna peek over here and grab my squash. All right, so I have a little bit of rice, a good amount of protein, and a lot of vegetables, and that makes a really great meal. For dessert, we actually are gonna have some applesauce that a good friend of ours made, and so that's why I have a little extra room on my plate. Okay, I hope that this was an easy meal for you to replicate. And again, these recipes are really for my daughter, and so hopefully when she's in her own apartment, she'll be able to make these recipes. And I'll see you next time on the next home cooked meal that you grew up eating. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.